Yo everyone, Guffin here. In 3.7 and the Synthesis League specifically, I played a Wander for the first time in a long time. It's been generally a blast. I pushed it to around 8.3 million Shaper DPS, which goes up to like 15 or 16 million, depending on what buffs I have active, at like 7.3k HP in my bossing gear. And I took it through all endgame content, including all endgame bosses that were available to me, and all maps, etc, etc. And I decided to make this video today because I still have some nice footage of that character lying around, and I recently saw, like in the past couple of weeks, I saw some discussions on Reddit about the state Wanders are in and how they perform, etc. And I have to say, like, it seems to me that the community, like usually, vastly over-exaggerates the state of things, because yes, Wanders aren't as meta as they used to be for a good reason. They simply don't compete with other stuff to the level that they used to, and they have their fair chunk of problems, but it's not as bad as people make it out to be, and it seems like in the near future stuff will get fixed. So if you want to hear me talking about Wanders for a couple minutes, or if you're interested in seeing how Wanders perform in the endgame, then keep tuned. I have clips of, I think, every endgame boss in the background to get this started, I guess. Here's the kind of fun and the kind of sad fact, I guess. Whenever I was playing this character in the temporary league and I was trading with someone or playing a map with someone even, they ask me, yeah, what build are you playing? And I say, I'm playing a Wander. And they ask me, oh, wow, cool, what skill is that? I've never seen that spell before. It's not Divine Ire, it's not Soul Rent. And like, it's kind of sad to see that, because obviously wands are innately associated with spells. That's just like a fantasy trope. But every weapon base type in PoE can be used to attack with, and like everything else, wands also has specific attack skills that can only be used with them, which would be Kinetic Blast and Power Siphon, or Vaal Power Siphon, I guess. And that's a very short list, yeah, but the people don't even know that there are attack skills you can play with wands. It's kind of sad, and it goes to show how neglected and overlooked the whole archetype has been for so incredibly long. So to put some numbers onto this, the latest addition to wands has been Kinetic Blast, which is also the most iconic skill that Wanders can use, I guess. That was released in 1.3.0, which was also the Torment and Bloodlines release, which most people don't even remember, because that was 4.5 fucking years ago. It's been 4.5 years, and Wanders have never seen a new skill ever since. And every change that Wanders got since then, every direct change, was mostly nerfs in a sense. Justified nerfs, yes, but it was nerfs. On the other hand, Wanders, like every build in the game, more or less, have benefited from passive power creep over the years. That's just how things go. So these days you can really get some crazy damage and health numbers like everywhere in the game if you invest enough. It's just how passive power creep goes. Ever since then, like, you got Sextants, you got double corruptions, you got shaper rares, you got abyss jewels, abyss items, you got new fossil crafting, which is hella OP, you got new master crafting, which is OP, etc, etc, etc. But still, the fact that wands rarely, if ever, get any attention by GTG, like, no new skills for 4.5 years basically, and if something happens, it's a nerf to them, makes the community kinda overlook the whole archetype. Totally justifiable, I guess, because if nothing happens, if nothing new happens, why play it? And regardless of all of these things, people return to playing Wanders all the time. And yes, it's stale because you don't have any new skills, but for the most part, the appeal of playing a Wander comes down to having access to Kinetic Blast, which still, after all these years, is the most pleasing skill to play with in the game, in my opinion, both sonically and visually. It's a fucking beauty to look at, and the gameplay is pretty absurd because it allows you to tear through tier 16 maps on absolutely minimal investment, because Kinetic Blast is mechanically pretty damn busted, even after the nerfs it received to shotgunning, like 2 nerfs, I guess. Shotgunning against Frostball, which was nerfed ages ago, and the wall banging shotgunning, which was nerfed in like Incursion or something. It's still an incredible skill for map clear. It still completely annihilates everything in maps, both open maps and closed maps. And to add on to all of that, wands are obviously crit builds, because the best wand base imbued wand has a very high base crit of 7%, and crit builds are, for many people, I would say the most satisfying ones to play, simply because you get those extremely satisfying shatters and Herald of Ice explosions, which are not only gameplay advantages because you get free corpse removal and better map clear, but it's also so beautiful to look at and listen to. Like, for some people it's legitimately hard to play a build without those crunchy explosions and shatters. And while we are on that topic, the best wand base imbued wand has a 7% base crit chance and 1.5 APS, which is actually pretty damn great for a ranged attack weapon, because for ranged attacks you obviously only have bows and wands, and the best crit bow would be Harbinger bows at 7.5% crit, which is 0.5% crit more than an imbued wand has, but Harbinger bows have to give up an implicit for that, which basically means you don't get to corrupt it, and you also synthesized bases are also out of the calculation. And it only has 1.2 APS, which is significantly worse than the wand. And the fastest bow base, which would be Thicket bows, has the same APS as an imbued wand, but 2% less crit at 5% crit chance. So the wand base itself, imbued wand, is pretty damn decent, basically. But that's also where, for a very long time, some of the problems come into play, because wands, like we talked about earlier, are obviously innately associated with spells and not attacks, and it makes sense. Like, wands are also the predominantly int-based weapon type in the game. Like, the wand nodes are located in the intelligence area at the north, around Witch. And the thing is, like, I don't know if you've noticed, but obviously weapons that have high int requirements and that are int archetypes, basically like wands, roll more caster modifiers than weapons that are more strength or dexterity focused, like swords or axes, basically. And when you try to roll a decent wand for attack builds, it's gonna be fucking rough, because most of the time those wands only roll caster modifiers instead of the attack speed or crit or fizz you really want on your wand. Hard sentence right there. And the thing is, like, for the most part that has deterred people from playing wands quite significantly. Simply because actually getting your hands on a decent weapon has been pretty hard. But in a recent patch, 3.7, we actually saw that GGG are willing and it's possible to alleviate this problem, because they introduced separate attack and spell-based bases for both staffs and daggers, which basically makes me hope that they will do the same thing in the eventual ranged balance patch, which will probably be 3.8, where we get a special wand attack crafting base which can only roll attack related mods and not any of those caster mods, which will be a big boost to Wander's popularity, because people can actually get decent weapons. Other than struggling to craft decent weapons for the build, Wanders have always had problems with the base type for one other reason, which would have been movement, because for the longest time until recently, Wanders didn't have access to any good movement skills. Because wands are innately ranged weapons, just like bows, They can't use any of the snappy and fast movement skills like a melee character can, like Whirling Blade, Sleep Slam, or Shield Charge. And you might ask, yeah, what the fuck? When you are playing with a wand, you can wield a shield, obviously, and I do with this character as well. But because Shield Charge is a melee attack, and wands are not melee weapons, you cannot use Shield Charge with a wand. And this has really crippled wanders for a long time, because you either had to invest heavily into movement speed, which I didn't on this character. Investing into movement speed usually means wearing a Queen of the Forest and devoting 1 or 2 flasks at least to getting your evasion to 45,000, which leaves you with a pretty weak chest for a wander and a pretty bad survivability, because that chest offers basically nothing on that front. Or the other choice would have been to play with Flame Dash or Lightning Warp, and Lightning Warp is a dumpster fire most of the time, and Flame Dash for the longest time has been pretty bad as well. Like, the problem is you don't have access to Fortify with those, obviously, which means less mitigation than most characters in the game have. Yes, you can do some weapon swap, Vigilante Strike shenanigans, but that's a lot of investment, but yeah, you can do it. But simply by only having access to Flame Dash, which was very slow on an attack character, where you don't have access to cast speed scaling, was fucking bad. Like, obviously for most of the content it doesn't matter, you press right click, everything dies, but whenever it matters, you need a snappy movement skill to actually be able to dodge stuff. And Flame Dash, for the longest time, wasn't that. It was slow, it was unreliable. Then came 3.4, which was the release of Delph League, and Flame Dash got some rework, which gave it some cooldown recovery scaling, some slightly faster cast time, which was great for wanders, made Flame Dash pretty reliable. And now in 3.7, we got instant movement skills, which is huge for wanders, because for the first time, you actually have a snappy movement skill that allows you to dodge at any time. It feels great. I tested it out on standard, because obviously Synthesis League is over, and I'm not playing a wander, but it feels so incredibly good to be able to dodge whenever you want. And this is true for Flame Dash, for whatever, I don't know, Frostblink if you want, Lightning Warp, not Lightning Warp. Lightning Warp still feels shit for whatever reason. But the biggest thing is, even though it's currently bugged, you have access to Shield Charge as a wander, and you can actually get Fortify now, because Shield Charge counts as a shield attack now, I guess, not a melee attack. As long as you're using a shield, you can still do it. I mean, I guess Shield Charge still is a melee attack, but it only requires a shield, not a melee weapon. So you might hear me complain about the lack of movement that wanders have had for the longest time, and you might think, what the fuck is he on about? Wanders are ranged characters, and they obviously shouldn't have the same access to snappy movement and the dodging playstyle like melee characters have. They need it way more. And obviously there's some truth to that argument, but in reality wanders are these days more melee than any melee character in the game. Obviously while mapping you saw that's not true, because you can use Kinetic Blast at range and still one-shot everything, and most of the time you don't even see the packs. But where it counts the most for a softcore character, I guess, that's focused on doing all content, actually on bosses and map bosses, you are more melee than a melee character that has any amount of weapon range, basically. Because the only halfway competitive skill that wanders have access to for single target situations would be Barrage, and mechanically Barrage doesn't allow for a ranged playstyle simply because the projectiles it has have a random spread. You can't control it, you don't know how it's gonna work out, and it gets only worse the farther away you stand. And if you stand like 10 units away or something, yeah, good luck hitting your projectiles, like half of it will miss the boss, and you just halved your damage. And that only gets worse the slower your projectiles are. Like, the faster projectiles, the narrower the spread, the slower they are, the wider the spread. And most of the time, the best 5th or 6th link for a wander would be slower projectiles. which makes you require to stand in point blank range even more. And you might say, yeah, okay, then fuck that, I guess. Don't play with slow projectiles and ditch the point blank keystone and stand a bit farther away. But Wanders don't have spectacular single target numbers. Like, you might see the footage here and say, yeah, that's obviously not true, but this character is min-maxed quite a bit, and Wanders on their own, they can hold the ground, and Barrage is an okay skill for pure damage, but the damage isn't great. And there are some things you can do to alleviate these problems, like invest more into projectile speed on the tree, replace slower projectiles with something else that's kinda decent, or maybe even better, because what I did was I made use of Energy Leech, which is still, after all, only slightly better than slower projectiles, because slow projectiles for me would still be the best fifth link, but I said fuck it. I just use Energy Leech, which is very, very decent, but still Barrage's mechanics don't allow people to actually be at range, like we see in these fights. You have to stand in point blank range of the boss, and Wanders sadly don't have the tools, or for the longest time didn't have the tools to do that. You had no access to Fortify, which is fixed now, and you couldn't dodge at all, which is also fixed now. So people saying that the Wander playstyle is kinda fucked are true to a certain extent. Like, for the longest time it was fucked, but now that's kinda fixed, because you have Fortify, you can dodge, you still don't have the amount of mitigation out of your ascendancy and shit like that that some melee characters have, and you don't have the amount of life recovery that they have. But it's gotten better than in the past. And that touches on the last problem that Wanders have. It's a lack of mitigation and the lack of life, for the most part. Obviously, passive power creep has not only happened in the offensive department, but also in the defensive department. You can roll some insane mitigation stuff on many slots now, like Fizz taking as various elements and stuff like that. But the thing is, like I said, Wanders don't have the best offensive numbers, and investing more into defenses obviously always means you're gonna lack a bit of offense, and some builds can get away with that. Wanders generally cannot without very big investment. And the problem with Wanders is, most of the time for a life-based Wander you're gonna play either a Deadeye or a Pathfinder. I guess you can play a Raider too, but why? It's gonna get changed in 3.8, yes, but currently why would you do it? And the thing is, those, besides Pathfinder, those don't really offer any mitigation, and even Pathfinder's mitigation is not that great, even if you invest into some chunky defensive flasks. And on that area of the tree, the right area already has very little amount of life, and if you play a Wander you have to branch out into the top area of the tree to grab the wand nodes as well, and there's even less life there, so good luck hitting good life levels on a Wander. But that's a problem that's not gonna get changed anytime soon, and that's the last problem that I would say still stands with Wanders these days. It's gonna get rough to make it a tanky character. Like, you have to rely on the snappy movement skills to dodge stuff manually, and you have to rely on your acrobatics and face acrobatics to carry your ass basically and get life in every slot and as much as you can, which you should obviously always do, but for Wanders it's even more required. So last but not least, I wanna summarize all the problems that Wanders have historically had, and to some extent still have, but I also want to show where the future might lead Wanders in general. So, like I've talked about to quite some extent, Wanders have always had problems in terms of movement, especially in boss fights, dodging. They've had problems with mitigation. Their offensive power has started to fall behind a lot in recent patches. The playstyle has always been clunky in boss fights, and to some extent in mapping recently, and their life levels have always been pretty damn low. but currently, especially 3.7 right now, has fixed movement for the most part simply because we have access to instant movement skills and shield charge, which makes dodging in boss fights a breeze. It's such a joy to be able to use decent movement skills as a wonder. Mitigation is kinda fixed by that as well, because we have access to Fortify now. It's not completely fixed, but it's a start. But the thing is, offensive power, it stayed the same. We actually got some very slight nerf by the Abyss Jewel nerf. I'm gonna go over that soon. But the thing is, in the 3.8 ranged attack patch, I don't know if it's gonna be 3.8, maybe it's 3.9, who knows. But in the eventual ranged attack patch, there will surely be power creep for wonders. Maybe wonders get a new single target viable skill that isn't Barrage. They will get a new support, they will get new nodes on the tree, stuff like that. That will all help the offensive power out, and it's sure to happen. And the thing is, the more offensive power you have, the less you need to focus on offensive scaling. Maybe you can invest some more in mitigation, maybe you can run some defensive curses instead of offensive ones and stuff like that. So I think that in the future, once the ranged balance patch hits, most of the problems that a wonder has will actually be fixed, because right now movement and dodging are fixed, mitigation has received some buff by having Fortify, but the eventual ranged balance patch will make wonders, maybe not meta, but it will alleviate most of the problems. The only last big problem that will probably persist is the playstyle, because unless we really get a viable single target skill, Barrage will still feel shit. But I hope we will get one, and the life levels, I'm doubtful that they will touch the life clusters all too much. Maybe we get some minor buffs on the right side of the tree to the life clusters, who knows. But I think the future looks extremely bright for wonders, and right now they are in a better state than they have ever been. And if the footage in the background makes you curious to try out a wonder, I would say right now is the time. Because as opposed to what large chunks of the community say that have never played a wonder in recent times, it's actually pretty decent. And the Abyss Jewel nerf is less than you might think, but more on that later. So now I just want to jump into PoB real quick to show how all the nerfs and buffs in 3.7 affect my character specifically, because there have been nerfs to Natural Instinct, nerfs to Abyss Jewels, buffs to the tree, buffs to accuracy, etc. I want to show how that goes real quick. This is the PoB like it was in 3.6 with 8.3 million Shaper DPS. I actually had to simulate the DPS and the accuracy by putting -800 accuracy rating on a jewel, because in 3.7 the accuracy got buffed and like it's got easier to reach 100% accuracy, and that is already included in PoB. But 93% hit chance at 8.3 million Shaper DPS, that was what I was at in 3.6. So if we update this now, and 7.3k life. If we update this now to 3.7, we have to retake those nodes. Those all got buffed here, those two notables. And that's basically it for now, which would be 8.6 million Shaper DPS, but obviously now we have 100% hit chance with the accuracy buffs, 9.4 million Shaper DPS. But that's not true, because Abyss Jewels got nerfed by 30%, well, their flat added damage got nerfed. And for this build specifically, you can simply take a look at how much of your added damage comes from Abyss Jewels, which for me would be 54%, and a 30% nerf to that would have been a 16% DPS loss, so 16% less damage. But that's not entirely true, because my cold damage is a bit more effective than my other damage, because I use a frost bomb, so but that's not up all the time, etc. But we're gonna round these 16% less damage up to 17% less damage, which I included on this Tombfist right here. So we end up at 7.8 million Shaper DPS. But Unnatural Instinct got nerfed as well, and I think it's not worth it anymore for non-ascendants, because those three nodes no longer give crit multi. So we spec out of that. And we take these shield nodes that are new down here that put us at exactly the same DPS that we had in 3.6. We retake 2 life nodes here because we lost 8% life from the Unnatural Instinct, and we take 1 last life node because I still had 1 point to spare. So in the end, the update in 3.7 leaves us with the same DPS, but slightly less life because the life on Abyss Troops got nerfed quite heftily. But after all, we have access to Fortify now, we have access to snappy movement skills, we can actually dodge, and that's such a huge quality of life buff to Wonders that I would say personally the survivability has actually gone up, especially if you consider you can get Fortify now. So you have less life as a number, but your effective life pool will probably be higher. Yeah, and other than that, I have different bossing gear sets here. I have one with my Animate Guardian included, which is simulated on this helm. He wears some cool stuff that you can look at in the Animate Guardian gear set. He basically gives me like 2 million more DPS as long as the enemy is cullable from full health, which is only true for the Nexus bosses like Cortex, Shaper Guardians, or a full health Shaper. And yeah, it gives me some other stuff as well. This is what you can see in the full health Shaper kill and the Cortex kills. And in those I also have Adrenaline for my banner, and I have Vaal Haste for 15 million Shaper DPS. That all stays the same like it was in 3.6. And there's a mapping setup you can look at. It's basically a helmet swap and some flask swaps. And here on the gear and the skill sets, gem setups, I guess, there's also the KB setup and an alternative Herald of Ice that I'm using for mapping for some extra damage and mitigation. Yeah, that's basically it. Wonders in 3.7, it's the same as in 3.6 more or less, but it's in terms of damage, but it got a lot better. A lot better due to all the quality of life we're getting in movement, etc. So all these people saying Wonders are shit now, they're fucking garbage. I don't know what to say to you. I would say it's wrong from my experience, and especially in the next patch, which would probably be some balance for ranged attacks, you will see how great Wonders can be, hopefully. I expect a lot from that patch. So yeah, have a nice day.